Welcome to the channel. In this video we're going to be going through the steps in creating a custom map for Workers and Resources Soviet Republic just using the tools available in the terrain editor. Now this video will consist of several parts. In the first part I will just go through the general overview of creating a custom map. In the second part once we get into the terrain editor, I'll go through some of the things you need to remember when you're actually creating a map. Then the third part will be looking at the terrain editor's auto terrain generation tools. The fourth part I will give a quick overview of the available terrain tools and how they can be used to modify a map. And then finally at the end I'll just wrap up with a few comments and observations and additional things you need to consider when you are building a map. That out the way, we might as well get stuck straight in. If we go into workshop, you'll see that the workshop offers a number of options. Subscribed items is the list of items you personally subscribe to in the workshop. Your items work in progress is the process where you actually turn your terrain map into a custom map, which then can be uploaded into Steam. And for any of you who've seen older videos on creating custom maps, this is often seen as the way to start the process, because what you would do is click on down here, you'd fill all this in, and then eventually you'd click and complete the map, and then you'd get an option to going into the terrain editor. But the downside of doing that is that you are creating terrain directly linked to the published map. Now there is a far better way to do it, and that is to come down to the terrain editor here. So moving down to the next entry, what we will have is this is a link that takes you to the workshop. This is the building editor, which I know absolutely nothing about. And then of course at the bottom we got the terrain editor, which is by far the best way to create a custom map, simply because what you're doing, if you click on the terrain editor here, you see we go into a load save terrain, and what you do is you effectively create a separate file of just the terrain that's on the map. And this is very useful if you are planning on creating both a populated and an unpopulated version of the map, because what you can do is create the unpopulated map with just the base terrain on, save it back to here, and then go and create the populated map, and then you've got two versions which you can then turn into a map that will be published up into Steam. Now one tip I will say is that if any of you look at this list, you probably think I haven't done very much. Well, before I started this video I had a little bit of a tidy up, and I reduced this down from 3 pages. And what tends to happen, because you're going to be saving regularly different versions of the terrain you're editing, this can pile up. So it does pay to have a little bit of a tidy up as you go through. And I think what we're going to do now is just going to click on this icon on the bottom right. It says create new terrain, and in we go. Just close this, and when you enter the terrain editor in default mode, you effectively get a big flat area with a lake in the center, and that's about it. Now there's nothing to say that you can't create a map totally using the tools up here, but I'll give you a bit of a tip. It is a very long process which can be a bit frustrating as well. So what you really need to do is use the terrain generator. But now before we do that, I just want to talk about the map in this form. Now across the top and down the right hand side is the NATO border, down the left hand side and across the bottom is the Soviet border. So when you're planning your map, bear in mind that where your connections are going to be. So if you're going to be interacting with NATO or the Soviet Republic, and of course most of the time you'll be interacting with the Soviet Republic. Now the next thing you'll see is this map is split up into squares. One thing you need to be aware of is if we come over to here, you will see that we are on the border with the Soviet Republic, and you can see that we've got this line here that marks the difference between the playable area on the right and the non-playable area on the left. And of course, because we're in the terrain editor, we can cross here because we can need to work on this area. But if you look on the mini map, I think that's about as, if I'm going to take it as big as I can, you'll see that although we're lined up over this line here, it doesn't exactly match with the squares here. In fact, if I draw a road out, it's roughly 500 meters. I think it's 500 meters. Nope. If we get to about 500, And then if we pull away, you will see that this road literally comes out and touches this border. So the actual border itself is 500 meters outside of that line there. And we'll just get rid of that road there because I don't want it appearing on the map. But this is something you need to bear in mind when you are both creating and editing the map, also when you're using the terrain editor in a minute. Now the other thing I want to do, let's get rid of that as well. We don't need that. Now the next thing I want to talk about is the resource map. Now quite a common mistake when people create their first map is that they don't consider the resources, and what often you get is these effects, because these are the template maps which are added when you start a completely new map. But what you can do, and this is something that you really need to do, it can be a little bit annoying sometimes. If you come into here, if you come up to the top here, you can see you've got the ability to paint and erase options. So if we come into here, what you'll see is the resource shows up as red patches, and of course the brush is actually a lot bigger than what you can do. If you go to the outer range, you can see how big it is. And what you can do is then remove the resources from the map so that you can paint the resources in that you want. So this is something that you do want to do so that you actually got control over the resources. I think that about covers the default map. What we're going to do now is just come up to the terrain generation process. Now the terrain generation process gives you three options. You've got the Perlin scale option, the diamond coefficient option, and then a kind of hybrid between the two. Now if any of you have played the game using the random map start, if I come and show you the Perlin option and just click generate, what you'll see is you will get a map very similar to what you will get when you click on the random. And personally, I don't like this option because you tend to have very smooth sweeping curves like this. And of course you can add water by increasing the amount of lakes. But to me, this doesn't really fit with what I would see as natural terrain. And this is the reason why I actually prefer the diamond coefficient. If I regenerate this map just using the same settings with the diamond coefficient, what you'll see is what we've now got is a map that's got a little bit of water on it. The terrain looks a bit more rugged and things are okay. And if you want something that maybe is a bit between the two, come in here. Now for some reason this one always takes a bit longer. But you can see even with the hybrid, what you tend to get is mountains are a little bit more rugged, but you still got that smooth kind of blend between the terrain. If I should turn the topographics on, you'll see that you get this kind of steep upslope and then the bits in between. So this is the reason why I recommend that what you do is you use the diamond coefficient if you're looking for a realistic landscape. I mean, it's totally up to you. The other thing I will say about these tools is these parameters at the top, if you decide you want to change them, be very careful. They do tend to be a bit sensitive and they do affect the overall overlay of the map. And what I've found is you can get pretty good results just by not changing these settings, because what we're going to do is change the terrain balance. What I will say is with these sliders, start with the default ones and just click generate. So we got this map here. And then adjust them slowly and what you get, because one thing I will kind of emphasize is that each map is generated from a random seed. So you will get different maps even by not changing these sliders. So you don't need to change the sliders that much unless you want to add water. So now what I want to do now is create a map that I'm looking for a new series, which is exactly the reason why I'm making this video, because I thought I'd share the process with you. And what I'm actually looking for is maybe a little bit more water. You can see, so the water's kind of creeping in a little bit. Maybe we'll do, and you can also see that if you adjust some sliders, other sliders will move in relation. Now this can be a little bit of a time consuming process, because what you can be doing effectively is just fiddling with the sliders and just continuously generating the map. Wow, well, that looks interesting. The only downside with this is I want a reasonable area in each corner of the map, and this is water, but I mean that is possible. Now that's got a good inroad of water, what I'm looking for, but the trouble is it's coming in from NATO, not the Soviet Republic, and what I'm looking for is some water coming in from the Soviet Republic. And here's an example of where you can get misled. If we come down to here, you'll see that although there's water coming in this side, it doesn't actually quite reach the playable area. So we're just going to generate a little bit more. Maybe we'll just drop just this a bit. Again, that's a nice formation of lakes, but it doesn't really do anything. Oh, that's interesting. Now the map generator doesn't create rivers, but if you've got a chain of lakes like that, what you can do is look at this and say, well, I can add a river into this. The only possible problem is down here that you don't actually have a strong connection to the edge of the map, which can cause problems if you're planning on using ships to sell goods to the Soviet Republic or NATO. So I'm just going to push that again. Not that happy with that. And that again. So we're just kind of pushing through these. I like that. Now, what you've got to remember is every time you click, you lose the map. But what you can do is just come up here and go to Save As and click down here. And you can I'll just mark that as option 1. If you see something that's got potential, just save it and then just keep clicking. I think what I'll do now is I want to find the map that I'm actually looking for. So what I'll do is I'll just keep flipping through until I find something that I can feel I can work with. Okay, welcome back. I've finally found a map that will suit the purposes I'm looking for the custom map that I want to make. And it fulfills all the main tick boxes. I'm not too worried about the detail because we can change that using the editing tools. But what I've got is a nice body of water coming in from the Soviet Republic over here. And what I'm planning on is this to be my starting location up here, because virtually every series I ever play is either at the bottom or the bottom right hand corner. And what I want to do in my next series is actually start in the top left hand corner. We've also got some water coming in over from this side. And I've got a reasonable starting position in each corner, which fits with what I've got envisaged for the series. The map's actually going to be called Four Corners. So what I'm going to do is I'm just coming here straight away and we're going to save this as Four Corners. So we're just going to save that there, because I don't want to lose this by clicking accidentally. Also, that if you've got the map you want and then you want to make changes, it always pays to save at regular intervals. The other thing I also like about this map is that it's got a nice mountain range up through the center, which kind of splits the map in half. But at the same time, we got a pass down here. But again, something you need to be aware of is that this pass is actually in the non-playable area. So this looks like an opportunity, but it's not. But what we do have is a nice pass in the center here, which kind of allows me to join the two maps together. So I think I'm quite happy with that. Now, the next thing you can do when you go on, and what I'm about to show you, probably applies more to if you've imported a terrain map. Now, if you're not sure how you import a terrain map, if you come to terrain tools here, you will see at the top here it says replace height map with DDS, replace height map with PNG. So if you've gone out onto the internet and used a package like Terrain Party or Tangram Height Mapper to get a real life terrain map, this is how you would import them into the terrain editor. And what you can do then is, if you see below it says terrain height in meters 1000, terrain offset in meters minus 238. I mean, as I said, this mainly applies to the imported terrain maps, but say like here, I've got this area here as a potential marsh. But what I can do is we just raise the water level 2 meters. And it's not really fitting, so maybe we come up a little bit more. Well, we're getting the beginnings of a lake here, like that. Maybe if we go up a little bit more, to 248. That's no. That's. I think we'll go back to 244. That's 24. Sorry. So what you can see is the profile is still here. If I come back here, just if it would be easier to see if I put the topographics on. What you'll see is that what we got is the profile of the seabed now. If I put 244 back in, you'll see is that we've now got the beach back again. Yeah, I think I quite like that area there. I mean, we've expanded the water level a little bit. Now the other tool here is terrain height. What this does is it allows you to adjust the actual height of terrain. So if I add on, say, 1010, what you'll see is that if you look here, what the game has actually done is it's magnified all the heights a little bit by raising. I think what it does is it raises the main height up here. So if we go here, what you'll see is the mountains all get a little bit higher, and what it does is it pulls up all the other terrain around it. So if I put this back to 1000, what you see is the mountain drops, but everything else drops around it. Say you want your mountains to look a bit more higher, or possibly if we go down, say to 950, like that, what you'll see is that the terrain goes there. In fact, what we've actually done over here is kind of created a little bit of a bigger lake here. So what we could do is maybe drop that down a little bit, maybe a little bit more, say 238. So this is how you can adjust the coastline and your overall terrain without actually doing so. But what I suggest you do is you do use the, when you're doing this, is use the new topographic feature, because otherwise if you look at this all looks deceptively and flat, but of course it's not really that flat. Of course, by doing this, what I've actually done is made the general flat areas in here a little bit more rugged with respect to the overall concept. Because if I put this back to 1000, what you'll see is that the ground terrain here has changed a little bit more back again, and we've got a lot less lakes now. Of course we can, what was it? I think the original height was 238, wasn't it? Yeah, but I actually quite like that 940, but I think what we'll probably do is take it to about 970, and that's kind of opened up that lake a little bit more. That means we've now got the potential here for a marsh with a lake running into here, which kind of makes the whole area look a little bit more interesting. Maybe we'll raise the sea level just, take it to 139. Actually, no, let's go down to 137. Just drop it down a little bit more, like that. As you can see, you can spend now a lot of time playing around with adjusting the sea level and all that to get the height. You can also see here what's actually happened is I've kind of opened up this gap a little bit more over here with respect to the mountains. Of course, with the topographic, you can see how steep and rugged these mountains are. So we'll just turn that off. I think that is enough of those parameters, as you can see. Now, what you can do, I'm just going to work in this area here because I'm kind of saying I want this to be a bit of a marsh. But now, if you've played the game, you'll be aware of these terrain tools. Now, what I will say is that these terrain tools are like the in-game tools, but on supercharger, because what you've got down here is brush strength. And to give you an idea, is if I put this up here and we just do a come here, and you can see now I'm only at kind of what, say 50%. You can see how quickly this can change. So what we'll have to do is just take this down again with the level tool. In fact, we can just smooth this out now. So when you use these tools, be a little bit careful with respect to how aggressive these are. And of course, what you can do is just do this. We'll just charge this up here. The smooth tool is quite a good way. In fact, let's just get rid of that little lake there while I'm at it as well. Now, one of the good things you can use with this these terrain tools is that, say for example, I want to bring these lakes up to being quite shallow. Now you see, if I run the cursor over the land, you will get the height above land, but you don't get it above water. But I'm pretty sure the water here is fairly deep. And what you can do is you can turn on this limit. If I say move this down, I really wish there was a way you could type this in, but unfortunately you can't. What I'm looking for is 7 meters, and then what you do is you can bring up the water underneath. And what it will do is it will raise all the land under the cursor to a certain point. In fact, 7 meters is probably still a little bit too shallow. 2 meters will make a difference. So we can just kind of run through here. I know it's not kind of showing very well. In fact, probably the best way to do it now is if I now flip to this tool, what you will see is the smooth tool will actually, no, what we'll do is we'll just drop this down a little bit, and what you get is this effect. And what this has done is it's actually reduced all this land to minus 2.37 meters. So if I come to 3.5, and what you will see is that will now come into like that. That's actually a little bit too high, but what we can do now is just smooth this in like this, and just smooth over the edge of the lake like this. Now, because this isn't that precise, what you can do is if you drop the strength down very slow, and this is probably at a point where you'd want to drop a save if you were working on something that's quite delicate. What you can do is you can, maybe it's still a little bit too strong, and what you can do is just very carefully touch through here, and if you drop the cursor down a little bit, and again, if you pay attention to the topographics like this, and maybe a little bit through here, if you just dab the cursor, and we can just kind of come here, and if you pay attention to the general topographic underneath, what you can do is just slowly bring the seabed up, so you create this kind of slightly shallow effect using the tool generally. Put that out like that. In fact, what we could probably do is just run this over here, strengthen this up a little bit. Yeah, so we could just smooth that in, and again we'll just weaken it down a little bit, and then you can create that in there. If we take the topographic off now, you can see here what I've done is created a kind of marshy area, but if you really wanted to kind of bring a few areas just above the surface we've got there, and we drop the cursor down, we can just bring in the strength down a little bit more as well. You can kind of dot in a little couple of islands like this. So it goes to show you how powerful the tools are, and this is another example of one of the things I don't like about the terrain editor, is that you can get these very sharp transitions between, so effectively you're creating cliff faces. So but what you can do here is come back to here, get here, and then come here, just increase the strength a little bit. You can see here the height here is about 93 meters. So if I take this up to a 101, yeah, I'll put the topographic on because it makes it easier for you to see. But if I just put a platform out like this, you can see all it will do is lift the ground to a certain point, and then if we increase it a smidge more, and what you can do is just come through here, maybe a little bit over there, like that, and a little bit more. We will drop the cursor down a little bit. What you're creating, and maybe we need a little bit of a bulge there, and something like that, and maybe a little bit more height in the center to give it a bit more character. What you're doing is just building up a series of little platforms. Come down here, across the back here like this. Then of course what you do is you bring in the terrain tool, the smoothing tool, strength down, actually let's push the strength right up because we're dealing with mountain edge. And what you can do is just stroke across like this, maybe up into here a little bit. And if you work through here now, you see you can slowly lose those curves, and of course you can work along the edge of the mountain like this, just to smooth that edge off like that. And what you get here is a platform here, which could be a potential mining site here. So that is the quick overview of the tools. Now to wind this video up, I just want to talk about a couple of issues. And one very common mistake when people create their first custom map is to forget about gravel. Now, gravel mines, if I show you here, and you can always check things by doing this. You see here that you've got absolutely no gravel at all on the map at the moment. And the way you add gravel is by using this rock tool here. And what I suggest is that you drop the strength down. I've always found it easy, so you can see how definitive this is, even at 27%. But what you can do is just do this in here. If you drop the strength down even more, go to 0, you don't get anything at all, by the way. But if you come in here, you can also limit the height if you want to. So if you want a straight line, you can do that. I find that it's just easier to kind of just stroke it in like this. And of course, the other thing you'll see is that as you add gravel textures to the map like this, what you also see is that as you add the rock textures to your mountains, they start to pop out from the green landscape. So you can put this here. I really wish that they would add a few more, say, terrain colors to this, so that we could get a bit more variety. Of course, you can create a cliff like this. What you can do now is if I come back to here and we pick up a gravel mine, what you will see is that we zoom right in. What you will see now is that if you run the gravel mine over here, you will see the percentage of the source. So the normal way of doing things is to paint mountains, but what you need to remember is that if you're planning a map, especially if you're intending to publishing it on Steam, you do need to consider the requirements of players with respect to, say, someone starting in this corner, which is where I intend to start. And so what you can do is come in here, and again, just put a little bit there, take the cursor down really small, and you can kind of paint the rock, paint some gravel in here. What you can create is almost the effect of this is a flooded gravel pit, or an area that's been flooded. And as long as you get, there's a little bit of an opportunity here. Of course, remember that what you can do is if you get a bit too much, you can always kind of stroke it back a little bit like that as well. Get what you're doing. But to illustrate what I'm talking about is if we come here and you now put a quarry in, you can't build over water, but what you will see is that you can get a quarry there. Maybe that's a bit too generous. You can see here you get 4% quarry there, 13% there. So just by stroking along the edge of water, you can get it in there. Of course, if you want to be ultra generous, we've got a little dip here with a tiny amount of water just in the center, but you could just literally, paint in a little blob like that. That gives you a 63% quarry. Of course, there's potential here as well, because let me just show you this. I know I'm technically building the map. And what you can do here is you can actually put the stone texture underneath like this, and then just trim it back a little bit like that. And what that means is that the player that wants to exploit this area would have to raise the level up here to get the stone texture above water. So that's another way that you can add a little bit of gravel to a map, but at the same time not making it very obvious. Of course, because you've got this slightly grey texture, it kind of adds a little bit to the effect. Actually, I quite like this. Actually, I think this might be something that I'm going to be using. So we'll just kind of take that round here. It's also, remember, you can go outside and you can just put in connections like that. Now, I'm not going to go into the placement of the other resources. That's purely what you feel for gameplay. But what I would say is don't rely on the one that's the default map, because it just makes the map look messy. And I think just to wind the video up, I'm just going to talk about one or two other things here. One is custom posts. Now you get the custom posts from here, and what you'll find is that you've got a selection of custom posts that you can place. Now, when you place custom posts, always make sure that you've got the road and rail links on the playable side. Don't do this. because if you do that, the players will have problems with connections. What you need to do is just make sure that the custom post is there, and of course we've got different custom posts. And of course, if you want to make your map look really realistic, what you do is you place the customs post and then you add the road to the edge of the map. That condition also applies to external power. Now if I zoom in with the external power, you'll see that what you've got is 4 possible connections, and what I've seen on some maps is something like this, where someone's actually split the connections across the border. When if you're going to put external power on, what you want to do is put it so that the whole of the terminal is actually inside the map like that. And what you can do is come to here, because everything that's available technically is, well, it is available. Is probably the polite way of saying it. But what you can do then is just run power cables off towards the edge of the map like that. And that makes it look a little bit more realistic, because it kind of emphasizes that the power is coming in from the outside. And I think that looks quite actually useful. But of course, the requirement of my map I'm intended to build is to actually not have external power. So I'm just going to take this away. The scars will heal over time. I think also, so if you place things, you get place names. What you want to do is remove them if you're not actually going to be using them, because they can be a bit spurious. And to do that, you just click on them and go cancel. I think that covers everything you really need to know if you're going to create an unpopulated map. Now, if you're going to create a populated map, you've got all sorts of options here. Now, you've got a series of basic buildings here. You've also, this is the only way that you can place churches that actually work. I know you can get mods that got churches, but this is the way you can place churches on the map. You can build up small towns using the in-game buildings, but strictly speaking, there is absolutely no reason why you can't use the buildings from here. In fact, you can also use mods, but if you're going to use mods, be aware that that imposes a condition on your custom map that anybody who wants to play that custom map is going to have those mods installed, because otherwise what will happen is if they load the map and they haven't got the mod installed, the building is wiped off the map. And of course, the other thing you can also do is, if you come up to here, is you can put infrastructure in. So you can put your customs post in, you can build roads, you can lay rail tracks, but you could build a completely modern city if you wanted to. And so that's something that you all need to consider when you're actually building a map. Now, that out the way, I'm going to come to what will be the last step when you create a custom map. And I want to emphasize this does definitely want to be the last step. If you place trees and then edit the map, what you'll find is you'll have trees out the water. Now up here, you've got an option here for auto-generating trees and placing trees. Now, if you come here, it says paint trees. You can choose the tree that you want to paint. And you've also got the auto-generate down here. Now, what I will say is, if you're going to go for the auto-generate, and it's a very good, quick way of getting a lot of trees on the map, but don't go for super density. What you want to do is go for, say, a fairly light coverage. I'll just give it here. Now, this will put a lot of pressure on your computers. If you are going to auto-generate a large number of trees, shut down any additional processes. And if you come in here, it says fill map, go here, and then you will wait. And what you'll see is that is added. That took about 15 seconds to generate, and you can see that the map's now literally covered with a kind of random pattern of trees. And if you don't like it, what you can do is, it says delete all trees, and they're all gone. So trees is something that you very much want to leave until you've got everything else in place. You're really happy with the map. You're never going to edit it again and make changes. But of course, what you can do also is you can paint trees. Now, what I'll give you a very top tip here is that if you are placing trees, uncheck that, because if you check this and go here, what you'll see is you've got to click a finger every time to place some trees. And you can change the density here. You can go to, say, 30, like that. And what you'll find is this, where it says number of trees, what it's actually telling you is the number of trees it will place in the position of your cursor. So if I'm coming here, you put this here, you'll get 30 trees like that. If I drop down like that, we kind of come down in descending order. Of course, if you go right down to the lowest level of ore, you get very dense patches. But this is a very tedious like that. But if you uncheck that, and then you can do this, you can see if you do this, you just got to hold the cursor and just run the mouse over everything you want to do. You can get trees, put trees down very quickly. So this is how you put trees. But again, as I want to emphasize, this is the last step when you create a map. Just gonna wipe that out. I mean, they disappear very quickly, but when you need to place them, and especially with auto generate, you're actually going to, it will take a little while. And actually, that's just reminded me of something else that I haven't covered. This is the smooth option down here. Now this allows you to smooth the terrain a little bit, and what you've got is it says smooth size, number of iterations 1000. Now personally I haven't really found much use for this, and what it does do is it like trees, it puts a colossal amount of pressure on your machine. And I did it once thinking I could really smooth off a map, and it took about I think it was up to about 8 minutes to do it. If you do a small change, it will do it in kind of 20-30 seconds, but this will really overload your machine. If you haven't got a very good powerful machine, that is a command to stay well away from. So that's where I'm going to leave it. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope this video has given you some insights into the process of creating a custom map, and possibly even inspired you to go ahead and create one. So until next time, whatever you do, enjoy your gaming.